On the northwest coast of Florida in the United States is a 250-foot deep sinkhole called Warm Mineral Springs. Here, people have come to bask in the sunshine and bathe in the hot mineralized waters since the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors. And they still come, mainly retired Middle Europeans, believing, as others have before, in the rejuvenating power of the springs. But 250 feet below the surface lie the ancient remains of extinct animals and humans. In these deep, dark waters, there have been made some of the most sensational discoveries from the prehistoric world. This man, retired Air Force Colonel William Royal, was the first to find human remains. Today, at 80, and crippled by a diving accident whilst exploring at the bottom of the springs, the colonel was at the center of a controversy that turned the archaeological world against him. It was in 1959 that an American TV company, attracted by William Royal's story, sent a Navy diver with a camera down into the springs to record the colonel's discoveries.
We started working up the slope and I picking up bones. We run into the skull. And the skull was sitting right on bedrock. So we had, sediments were laid down and from 10,000 to 8,000 years ago. They wanted me to pick the skull up and hold it in my hands and bring it up to the surface, which shows that in the movie. But the most important thing is when I turned the skull over, there was hard-packed leaves stuck on the base of the skull, and so I waved the leaves off underwater. And right to the foramen magnum hole, where the spinal cord comes through the bottom of the skull, I noticed this looked just like white ivory soap. And so I started to stick my finger in and thought, gee, I said, this is real strange sediments. So, which this shows us in the movies, as I go up, I'm sticking my finger in and wobbling it around. Then a thought occurred to me, this has got to be brain material. And oh my God, I was really, really disturbed because here, probably the first time in the history of the world anything like this had happened here. I destroyed over half the brains already. I was really concerned, but there was about at least a third of the brains left. And when we got up to the surface, I told everybody, I said, it's fantastic. I said, we got a human brain in this skull.
When the skull was cut open, 1/3 of the brain remained intact. It was dated at around 11,000 years old. After the film was shown, no one believed it, and it was branded a hoax.
I've always known that we had the most important archaeological site in the world, and the first one in the world like it, because I traveled around the world extensively, and I've been looking a lot. Anyhow, the most important thing is that you could work down there for 100 years with a team of archaeologists wouldn't find it all. But we expect to go back. We've already gone back about 12,000 years in time, and we should go back 15, 18,000 years as a possibility with humans.
However, One man who did take notice was Florida State underwater archaeologist Dr. Wilburn Cockrell, known as Sonny. For years, he had been searching off the Florida coast for Paleo-Indian settlements. When he heard the stories of fantastic finds and early graves at warm mineral springs, it was too much for him to resist. But fearing his reputation might be destroyed, he arrived in 1972 with what he recalls as a good, healthy skepticism.
Well, I was rather skeptical about it when I first came here because for 10 years the archaeological profession had been discussing this as one of the most significant frauds in American archaeology. Unfortunately, discoveries Colonel Royal made were so earth-shaking that no one was willing to believe him, and that's when the fraud story started. It's a very eerie dive, a first-time dive, or maybe even a second or third or 20-time dive. It's a very, very strange place to dive. In the morning, it's clear, and in the afternoon, the water turns murky because it's photosensitive. We went down on the north side, and Colonel Royal took me to see the stalactites. And as a proof, the stalactites are wondrous proofs that this hole was once dry. I mean, stalactites take thousands of years to form, and the entire circumference of the cavity is ringed with dripstones, or stalactites, around 30 to 40 feet. Now, there are some as shallow as 12 feet, and there are some as low as 90 feet. Some of them are as large as trucks. And so I was able to swim through those and see for myself the actual proof that this place had indeed been dry for thousands of years. Of course, my question as an archaeologist was it dry when the people were here? I mean, if Colonel Royal had found human remains, were they there because they'd fallen in? Were they Indians that an alligator had perhaps caught on the surface and pulled under? Or just how did these bones, which Bill claimed to have found, come to be here? As you go in as a diver, this hole slopes down and then drops off suddenly and becomes a giant hourglass. It drops down from about 12 feet, and then there's a ledge. It opens up at about 43 feet, and there are small caverns, and then it comes back together, and its minimum diameter is half the surface diameter, and that's at about 65 feet down, and then it proceeds to open up again at about 100 feet. And from 100 feet, the walls slope outward from the middle, and it's as wide at the bottom, at 230 feet, as it is at the top. So we have a situation of an hourglass here. And at the bottom of the hourglass is a cone, just as we have in the center of an hourglass. That cone we hit in the center at 124 feet below the present-day surface.
It's the cone that holds the secrets of the springs. Whatever or whoever fell to the bottom will be there below the layers of accumulated debris, preserved by the bacteria-free water. But to excavate at this depth is both difficult and dangerous. Having satisfied himself that the site was legitimate, Sonny Cockrell gathered together a team of scientists, divers, archaeologists, and a video system to record and demonstrate the potential of what he felt was one of the most important archaeological sites in the world.
Oh, we've got a beautiful picture.
That's always been one of the criticisms of underwater excavation, is that you could not excavate stratigraphically. As you can see, that's absolute bullshit.
With limited funding, the work went on for 5 years, until the state suddenly closed down its vast underwater program, and the money ran out. In 1984, Sonny Cockrell came back, but he desperately needed help, and he got it.
166 Sarasota. I'll be 10-8, about 10.
Deputy Sheriff Skip Wood, having completed a master's degree in archaeology, volunteered his services and became part-time dive master and assistant archaeologist.
Florida tag 241 Z Zebra J. John H. Henry.
Cockrell persuaded the state to donate $100,000 to the project, and at last things began to move again.
If you want mesh or you want Cordura, the Cordura is more expensive, just a couple dollars.
Sonny's wife, Barbara, ex-model, diver, and chief assistant.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Barbara had worked alongside Sonny for 2 agonizing years to help get the diving restarted. Living and working in a small apartment a mile from the springs, the Cockrell's life is now completely taken over by the project.
The man hours that we've had to put in because of the limited staff are just incredible, and the amount of work that we've laid out to do this project properly is just too much that can be handled at any given amount of time. And so we're all pretty overworked, but we're all dedicated, and we're all just hanging in there with it.
So, with borrowed equipment, minimal tools for the job, and no on-site backup, the retired colonel, the deputy sheriff, the ex-model, and the archaeologist prepare to take on the task of excavating at the 45-foot ledge. They face the same problems as those of Nicholas Dixon in Scotland, an underwater site that cannot be seen, and information that will take time to be revealed. It's not the sort of project that attracts publicity-seeking sponsors in a commercial world.
Studying the formation of the spring.
Big shape. If you find something that I can.
12,000 years ago, the water level was 90 feet lower than it is today. Animals and people could climb down the vertical walls and shelter under the stalactites on the various ledges, just above the waterline. Today, these ledges are layered with remains: giant ground sloth, camel, saber cat, and of course, human beings. Every find is marked and plotted. In every crevice, there are leaves, hickory nuts, pollen and wood, dating back 20,000 years into the Pleistocene age. Enough material to occupy the largest of laboratories and an army of scientists. So far, Cockrell has accounted for a total of 20 separate skeletons. One in particular was the earliest intentional human burial found in North America. With the remains was a very unusual find.
Well, this is made of carved shell, carved from the central column of a whelk, our marine gastropod. This was the hook for a spear thrower. It, when found, still had the original black pitch on the bottom. It was glued to the end of the throwing stick and then lashed on. This was the far end. The stick was about this long, and we did not find the stick, unfortunately, with burial number 1. But this is the earliest evidence of the use of a spear thrower in all of the Western Hemisphere, and it's found with the burial at 10,240 years ago. With this spear thrower, or the Aztec word for it is atlatl, an Indian could stand here and kill at great distances with great force for the first time in the history of humanity. And we see just within 2,000 or 3,000 years following the introduction of this tool into this area, the Native American populations grew in size and grew in stature. And I think this tool was one of the keys in that.
We're a lot deeper.
If the people were here, burying their dead, where were their settlements?
Can you put that in the national crime statistics?
Certainly.
With the help of the local adult educational college, Sonny now runs a field school, digging trenches down into the grounds that surround the springs.
We're getting a lot of this. It's in one area. It's in the south part of the trench.
Oh, okay,
tough.
you are in.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
it's really
okay.
tough. There's nothing.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Right. It was so tough at first we thought we had come into some iron filaments. But
So far, they've found only a few primitive tools, scrapers and flints. Of the village or campsite, there is as yet no sign.
So what we're finding on land right now is negative information. We're finding that the people were not here very much. And that continues to intrigue me. I mean, in this sense, negative evidence is very, very real evidence. And all this leads me to again, my conclusion that the utilization of warm mineral springs by these early people must have been primarily ceremonial.
During the day, it's hard to imagine the springs as a ceremonial burial ground. But at night, when the hot water steams, it becomes home to alligators and insects, drawn in by the sulphurous air. It becomes what it was, a primeval swamp.
We come down here many, many times, daytime, night, ideally. We love to come here when there are people here, but most of all, we love to come here when it's just ours, just to us. And we get down and we can see fog coming off. I truly think we can feel what it was like when the people were here.
Especially when it's a full moon.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll be down here, particularly when I'm just walking alone, and think, well, there were trees 150 feet tall here then, and I can walk down and just worry about mosquitoes, and back then you'd have to walk through here and wonder about the saber cats. Where were they? We'd be sad. We'd be very, very sad if we had to leave. I think it's urgent that we save this place. I would love to be able to do research as well, but primarily I want to save it, and that's where our efforts are directed now. My primary goal in all this is to preserve this site. There is no law in this country to protect archaeological remains on private property, and this is private property. It is up for sale. If the new owners would want to back up a dump truck and fill it up with gravel, they could. Or if they wanted to have divers come in here and dive all they want for 25 cents an hour, they could. This place is only being protected by the goodwill and generosity of the owners, and that's all the protection it has.
Cockrell's team continue to work knowing that each season could be their last. And they know too that the greatest surprises lie in the cone at the bottom of the springs. But at that depth, without the proper equipment, they literally risk their lives.
150 feet or over is an exceptional dive. It's a very dangerous dive. And to begin with, they're just the physiological problems. Aside from staying alive and aside from pressure, there are problems with breathing compressed air, which contains 78% nitrogen. By the time we breathe that much nitrogen that deep, there's a lot of impairment of reasoning and judgment and ability to think. But we've learned to deal with it. We've even done video down that deep to show that we can do it. We have done the deepest prehistoric work in the world.
As they leave the vertical wall, they follow a line and a compass course down into the darkness. The mineralized water has a destructive effect on their equipment. In the past, demand valves have jammed and their air supply has been cut. The cone, with its deck chair, looms up like a mountaintop. They have only 20 minutes to excavate a small trench on the side of the hill. It's hard work breathing air at 6 times the normal pressure, and the sides of the trench are in danger of collapsing onto the diver.
I will not be at all surprised to find more human brain material and perhaps even find flesh. It would not be impossible to find human tissue in here or animal tissue. The possibilities of what you could do with DNA studies and that, of course, are endless. I think that this site is one of the most spectacular windows into the past that one could ever have. We can travel back in time here. We don't have to imagine what the world was like 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. When we get the analysis done here, we will know. There's no reason that we shouldn't have the same preservation here that you get in the Danish peat bogs. We have the same situation. We have an anaerobic peat. So what we have is, in this one hole, standing right here, a fossil history of both the flora and fauna of the Pleistocene going back at least 20,000 years.
Underwater archaeology has changed our view of prehistoric man. The work is remarkable, the finds astonishing. Our knowledge continually grows. It is certain that in the near future, there will be discoveries to hit the world's headlines. The only uncertainty is whether there will be the recognition and support for the work to continue.